The violent mink's figure flashed onto Yang Ye's shoulder, and then it rubbed its forehead against Yang Ye's face. Moreover, the glimmer of tears flickered within its eyes. Obviously, it didn't want to leave Yang Yi as well. Yang Ye's heart instantly hurt as well when he saw the little fellow act in this way. How could he be willing to part with the little fellow? Since he'd been born and until he met the little fellow, Yang Yi had always been alone. Only when he met the little fellow did Yang Yi understand that there was another form of affection besides family love, and that was friendship. The little fellow and Yang Yi could die for each other. So, if it was possible, he would rather never part with the little fellow forever. However, his current ability didn't allow it. Being together with him will only harm him. Meanwhile, the beautiful woman spoke in a gentle voice. If you still stay with him now that your identity has been exposed, then not only would you be in danger, he would as well. Understand. The violet mink rubbed Yang Ye's face with its claw, and then it started waving its claws about. After a short while, Yang Yi laughed bitterly and said, I can't go with you. You ought to be aware that I have many things that I need to do, and I have to accomplish them. I'll go look for you in the demon territory once I'm done with all of that, and then we'll travel the entire continent together, all right? The violet mink suddenly shook its little head, and then it hugged Yang Ye's neck with force while droplets of tears gradually seeped out from its eyes. The demon empress and mink emperor exchanged glances, and they saw shock and bewilderment in each other's eyes. Yes, they hadn't imagined that the relationship between the violet mink and Yang Yi would be deep to such an extent. Could it be that Zir has aroused feelings of... When they thought of a certain possibility, both of their expressions instantly changed, and then they exchanged glances while a cold glow flashed in their eyes. The demon empress hesitated for a moment before she nodded. In the next moment, she waved her fair hand, and then space warped before she instantly vanished with the violet mink. I actually didn't want to kill you. After the demon empress and the violet mink vanished, the mink emperor gazed at Yang Yi and said in a low voice, because you saved Zir's life in the end. Moreover, even I have no choice but to admit that your natural talent in the sword Dao is extremely monstrous. So long as you don't die prematurely, then Zir will definitely have an extraordinary expert as a friend. However, based on her attitude towards you just now, I know that Zir's feelings towards you are absolutely not limited to ordinary friendship. So, I have no choice but to eliminate you in order to put an end to such thoughts of hers. Yang Yi gazed at the demon emperor without the slightest fear on his face, and he chuckled and said, Senior, you wanted to kill me since the beginning, right? The demon emperor nodded and said, Indeed, even though the two of you are friends, you humans are the ficklest. You may be friends now, but perhaps you'd become her enemy in the next moment for the sake of your own interests. I can't be at ease if she's with a human. Yang Yi chuckled, and then he gazed at Madman Huang and said, Senior Huang, you said that you'd deal with any trouble I get myself into. Does that offer still stand? Madman Huang's expression instantly turned slightly unsightly. Even though he couldn't defeat the Mink Emperor with his strength, he still had the ability to fight the Mink Emperor. However, the problem was that he couldn't fight the Mink Emperor, because if he offended the Spatial Mink clan, then the Divine Sword Sect would be in huge trouble. Everyone in the continent knew that the Spatial Mink clan usually didn't cause trouble, but once it did, then it was absolutely horrifying. Not to mention the Divine Sword Sect, even the 3 9th rank sects wouldn't dare to rashly offend the Spatial Mink clan. However, Yang Ye's natural talent was truly monstrous. If Yang Yi joined the Divine Sword Sect and received both the resources and fostering of the sect, then Yang Yi would definitely become an extraordinary expert in the future. At that time, it was very likely that the Divine Sword Sect would advance into the ranks of 9th rank sects, and it was even to the extent that it might even become a 10th rank sect. Now, a huge problem was placed in front of Madman Huang. To save or not to save? Save him. Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly said in a low voice, Madman Huang, the Divine Sword Sect is in a gradual decline now. If someone capable of re-energizing the sect doesn't appear, then the Divine Sword Sect would probably not even be able to stay an 8th rank sect. Since it's like that, then why don't we gamble on him? If this kid is able to survive, then my divine sword sect will definitely be renowned throughout the profounder continent, even if he's the only one remaining in the entire sect. Madman Huang took a deep breath and said, "But me, you, and even more disciples of the sect will die." Xianxia felt silent. Indeed, if we fight the Mink Emperor for Yangyi, then it'll be equivalent to the Divine Sword Sect having to face the formidable Spatial Mink clan. Once war breaks out, then it wouldn't be just a problem of death in the sect. The entire sect might even be eliminated from the central territory. The barrier between territories was effective against any clan and race except the Spatial Mink clan. Yang Yi glanced at Madman Huang's expression, and then he grinned as he gazed at the Mink Emperor and said, "Senior, you possess unfathomable ability. So can I ask 2 requests from Senior before I die?" "Don't worry, both of them won't trouble Senior." The Mink Emperor gazed at Yang Yi for a short while before he said, "Out of consideration for the fact that you saved Zir, speak of your requests." Yang Yi bowed to the Mink Emperor, and then he turned around to gaze towards the distance. That direction was the Southern Territory. After a short while, the Mink Emperor glanced at Madman Huang and Xianxia. Madman Huang understood the Mink Emperor's intentions. He cupped his fists, glanced with a complicated expression at Yang Yi, who had a slightly blanked gaze, and then his figure flashed and vanished with Xianxia. Once they left, the Mink Emperor waved his hand, and then an extremely enormous mirror appeared in space. He said, "This mirror is called the Space Mirror, and it can satisfy your first request." As soon as he finished speaking, the Mink Emperor waved his hand once more. In an instant, the surface of the mirror suddenly started flickering, and then a scene gradually appeared on it. The Flower Palace. There was a cliff that one couldn't see the bottom of at the rear mountains of the Flower Palace. The bottom of the cliff was extremely dark, and bone-piercingly cold winds swept through it. The gusts of cold wind here were like sharp blades that even cut the air apart, and it caused the bottom of the cliff to be filled with sharp whistled from the air being torn apart. There was a round platform at the center of this place, and a dense expanse of pitch-black poles stood on the round platform. Countless women were tied to those poles. Some of these women were dead, and they died horribly because their faces had been cut by the cold wind to the point of being unrecognizable, and some had even been cut into countless pieces. However, even more of them were still alive. However, these living women weren't in much of a better state than those dead women. The bottom of this cliff was the renowned passionless cliff of the Flower Palace, and the cold winds that sliced through the air here were called Cold Bale Wind. The Cold Bale Wind was especially utilized to punish the disciples of the Flower Palace who had violated the rules of the palace. Suddenly, a middle-aged woman appeared on the round platform. Terror instantly arose in the eyes of those women who were tied to the poles when they saw this woman, because this middle-aged woman was in charge of Passionless Cliff. Of course, the most important reason was that this woman had a slightly twisted mental state. This middle-aged woman had once fallen in love with a man just like all of the women here. However, the man she fell for was a disloyal fellow that had only approached her for wealth and pleasure. After that, her mental state started to become twisted, and she couldn't bear to see men and women of the world being in love. It was exactly because of this that the Flower Palace had assigned her to manage Passionless Cliff, because she would absolutely not hold back against these disciples who'd fallen in love. When she noticed the terror in their eyes, the middle-aged woman instantly revealed a cruel smile and said, "Tisk, Tisk, geniuses of the past, it's time to enjoy. Come, enjoy it well." As soon as she finished speaking, the middle-aged woman flipped her palm, and then a pitch-black whip appeared in her hand. When they saw this pitch-black whip, the delicate figures of the women in the surroundings couldn't help but tremble, because this whip was called the Soul Strike Whip. As its name implied, it struck the soul. Most of the women being kept here were at the spirit realm or above, so with the strength of their physical bodies, it was utterly impossible to harm them with ordinary attacks. So, the Flower Palace had specially created this Soul Strike Whip, because no matter how painful physical pain was, it couldn't even compare to a tenth to the pain that came from the soul. As she gazed at their terrified expressions and trembling figures, the middle-aged woman's smile grew even brighter. she said. All of you bitches brought this upon yourselves. You could have enjoyed luxury and status in the palace, but all of you just had to fall in love. Now, all of you can enjoy the torture from this damnable cold bale wind every single day and even suffer whippings 3 times a day. Don't all of you think that you asked for this? As soon as she finished speaking, her hand moved, and a bang resounded as the whip in her hand transformed into a black shadow that swiftly descended onto a woman in front of her. A miserable and shrill cry instantly resounded. The woman's face warped from pain, and her body even started to tremble violently. The middle-aged woman seemed to feel even more pleased with herself, and she raised the whip in her hand and waved it over and over again towards the woman. After a short while, the woman fell unconscious, but her body was still trembling violently. Humph! How weak! The middle-aged woman grunted coldly when she saw the other woman faint, and then she raised her arm with the intention of swinging her whip onto the woman once more. Right at this moment, a woman tied to the pole on the left of that fainted woman suddenly said, "Lang Yu, she has already fainted. Is it necessary to act in this way? Be lenient when it's possible. After all, we were once from the same sect." The hand of the woman called Lang Yu stopped in midair, and then she gazed at the women who spoke those words. A wisp of gloominess flashed in her eyes as she said, "Feng Yu, don't even think that you can order me around just because someone within the sect is protecting you. Allow me to tell you that I'm in charge of everything within Passionless Cliff." Humph. It looks to me like you haven't had a taste of the Soul Strike whip for a long time, right? I'll let you taste it today. As she spoke, Lang Yu's figure flashed while she suddenly swung the whip at Feng Yu, and the Soul Strike whip actually left a string of black afterimages behind when it was swung with her full strength. Whip! It struck forcefully onto Feng Yu's body. Feng Yu instantly felt her soul shudder. The sharp pain that came from the depths of her soul caused Feng Yu's brows to knit together tightly. Just like the woman from before, Feng Yu's body couldn't help but tremble violently. However, Feng Yu didn't make a sound. Humph! You're quite unyielding, huh? Lang Yu grunted coldly, and then she raised the whip and swung it at Feng Yu. In less than a quarter of an hour, Feng Yu's entire body was covered in marks left behind by the whip. Moreover, while she hadn't fallen unconscious, her countenance was extremely pale and without the slightest hint of red. Coupled with the countless marks of the whip on her body, Feng Yu seemed to be in an extremely horrifying state. Year. Yower. Feng Yu slowly closed her eyes. At the moment before her eyes had closed completely, 2 names gradually had emerged from between her lips. Year? Yower? You're still thinking about those 2 bastard children of yours? Lang Yu laughed coldly and said, "A bitch will always be a bitch. Not only did you have a secret relationship and fell in love with a man, you even bore children for a man. Humph. To tell you the truth, those 2 bastard children of yours are dead." What? Suddenly, Feng Yu, whose eyes had already closed, had suddenly raised her head to gaze at Lang Yu, and she said, "No, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. The Sword Sect will protect them." The Sword Sect? Lang Yu laughed coldly and said, "Would that piece of trash sect that's in decline dare to go against my Flower Palace? They could only hand over those 2 bastard children in the face of my Flower Palace's request. Do you know how horrible their deaths were? Come, allow me to slowly describe it to you. We first castrated your son and allowed him to suffer the most painful torture in this world, and then we used the Soul Strike whip to strike him to the point his soul dispersed. As for your daughter..." No! Feng Yu closed her eyes in pain, while 2 streams of clear tears flowed out of her eyes like torrents. The reason she was still alive was that she wanted to see Yang Yi and Yang Yao. Or perhaps it could be said that she wanted to give Yang Yi motivation to fight, because she was very clearly aware that one could only take control of one's own fate by possessing strength. It could be said that if it wasn't for these 2 reasons, then she should have died a long time ago. After all, no one wanted to suffer the cold bale wind and soul strike whip in Passionless Cliff for eternity. Yang Ning, Flower Palace, I won't forgive you even in death. Feng Yu raised her head and roared furiously. Her voice sounded as if it came from hell, and it was horrifying. Whip! Lang Yu suddenly whipped Feng Yu's face. In an instant, a bloody mark that was a few centimeters long had instantly appeared on Feng Yu's face. However, this wasn't the end because Lang Yu waved the whip once more, and it seemed like she was doing it on purpose because every single whip struck Feng Yu's face. In next to no time, Feng Yu's entire face was covered in red marks from the whip, and it seemed extremely hideous and horrifying. You won't forgive the Flower Palace? You? The meridians in your body are already destroyed while your soul is about to disperse. You're even worse than an ordinary commoner now. So, how would you do anything to my Flower Palace? As she spoke, Lang Yu continued swinging the whip at Feng Yu, but she didn't utilize her profound energy this time because the higher-ups had ordered that Feng Yu couldn't die. Now, she was purely torturing Feng Yu's body. The ancient battlefield. At the moment he saw Feng Yu being on the verge of death through the scene displayed by the mirror, Yang Yi was unable to suppress the ruthless killing intent in his heart anymore. Ah! Suddenly, a miserable and resounding howl of rage that carried heartrending pain resounded here. Because he was in too much pain, Yang Ye's entire face had warped severely while his eyes had become terrifyingly crimson red as if they were dyed with blood. His hands were clenched tightly to the point his nails sunk deep into his palm, and fresh blood flowed incessantly down his fingers. Flower Palace, Flower Palace, Flower Palace, Flower Palace. Ah! Yang Yi, whose eyes were crimson red and had a savage expression on his face, had suddenly howled like a wild beast, and then a resounding sword howl suddenly erupted from a sword. After that, a trace of blood red shot into the sky as the little finger on his right hand shot into the air as well. I, Yang Yi, swear that I'll suffer eternal damnation if I'm unable to completely annihilate all the disciples of the Flower Palace in my lifetime. As soon as he finished speaking, a strand of peerlessly violent and ghastly slaughter intent suddenly surged explosively from Yang Ye's body, and it was accompanied by his sword intent. The slaughter intent seemed to be boundless, and it raged in the surroundings along with Yang Ye's sword intent. These two intents gradually mixed together, and they became indistinguishable from each other after a short while passed. The expression of the Mink Emperor, who was watching coldly from the side, had suddenly changed as he said, "His sword intent has mutated. Slaughter sword intent. How could this be possible? How could the future Sword Emperor possess slaughter sword intent?" Slaughter sword intent could be said to be a combination of sword intent and slaughter intent, and its might was countless times stronger than pure sword intent or slaughter intent. There was sword intent within slaughter intent, and there was sword intent within slaughter intent. However, it was very likely for slaughter sword intent to corrode the mind of the one that had comprehended it, and it would cause that person to become a complete and utter machine of slaughter. What was the Sword Emperor? The Sword Emperor was righteous and upright. All Sword Emperors definitely possessed an aura of righteousness. It didn't mean that the Sword Emperors would definitely be good people, but it meant that those who became the Sword Emperor were usually not bloodthirsty individuals. Because the Sword Emperor's sword was connected to the heart, so the Sword Emperor had to have a clear conscience if they killed. Moreover, if the Sword Emperor wasn't able to maintain a clear conscience, then the mysterious ancient sheath on Sword Emperor Mountain wouldn't continue staying by the side of the Sword Emperor. Slaughter sword intent didn't represent bloodthirst as well. However, every single person in history who'd comprehended slaughter sword intent was fond of killing. So, the Mink Emperor was extremely bewildered right now. He couldn't figure out why Yang Yi, who clearly possessed the enlightened sword heart, and was the quasi-sword emperor, would undergo a mutation of sword intent and attain slaughter sword intent. Could it be that he isn't the future sword emperor? The Mink Emperor shook his head. All of this isn't important anymore. He'll be dying once I've completed his requests. So, it still wouldn't make a difference even if he improves his sword intent to the perfect 10th level of sword intent right now. After a short while, Yang Ye's eyes were still crimson red, and his gaze was slightly blank as he suddenly said, "My final request is to head to a place." The Mink Emperor frowned as he gazed at Yang Yi, who seemed as if he'd lost his soul. And then the Mink Emperor said, "All right, Death Abyss. The Mink Emperor and Yang Yi appeared at the bottom of Death Abyss. After they arrived here, the Mink Emperor swept the surroundings with his gaze, and then he frowned and said, "Where's the person you wish to meet?" "He's just ahead." Yang Yi pointed towards the cottage in the distance, and then he walked over slowly and bowed before he said, "Elder Mu, I can't die yet." Creak. The door was opened slowly, and then an extremely old and hunched man walked out while supporting himself with a walking stick. The man's aged appearance and weak body made it seem like just a gust of wind could blow him to the ground. However, it was precisely such an old man that caused the Mink Emperor's expression to change. Elder Mu glanced at the Mink Emperor before he gazed at Yang Yi, and then he sized up Yang Yi before he grinned. "Not bad. 6th level sword intent and the 5th rank of the King Realm. Such speed is truly shocking. Unfortunately, your sword intent has mutated, so you'll be unable to inherit the mysterious ancient sheath. However, it's fine because slaughter sword intent is the purest and sharpest amongst all types of sword intent. Coupled with the enlightened sword heart that you possess. Haha! Would anyone be able to resist a single strike of your sword in the future?" As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Mu nodded to Yang Yi, and then he gazed at the Mink Emperor who had a solemn expression on his face. Elder Mu said, "Spatial Mink. Ha! Xiao Tianji once said, the divine treasure emerges, the violet pupils appear, chaos envelopes the world, the heaven path will clear, all living beings prosper. I presume you've heard of these words." The Mink Emperor's expression changed swiftly when he heard this, and then he gazed at Elder Mu and said in a low voice, "Who exactly are you? Why do you know of Xian Tianji's prophecy from 10,000 years ago?" "I'm just someone that's about to die." Elder Mu shook his head and said, "Mink Emperor, I can't stop you from killing him, but if you do kill him, then that prophecy will cease to exist. In other words, your spatial Mink clan will be buried along with all the living beings on Profounder Continent." "What do you mean by that?" The Mink Emperor's expression was slightly unsightly, and the space around him rippled. Elder Mu raised his head slightly and gazed towards the sky in the distance. After that, he said softly, "Mink Emperor, do you know why no one has been able to overcome the heaven path after the Unfettered One cleared it all those years ago?" The Mink Emperor stated in a low voice. "The Unfettered One was extremely formidable indeed." "He was formidable indeed." Elder Mu smiled and said, "He crushed the entire heaven path with just a single sword in hand. Not to mention in the history of the past 10,000 years, even if it was in the history of the continent for a few 10,000 years, no one has been able to accomplish that. As for the future." When he spoke up to here, Elder Mu glanced at Yang Yi and then he said, "There's probably no one besides him who can accomplish that." The Mink Emperor glanced at Yang Yi and said, "Is that so?" Elder Mu smiled and said, "Let's speak about the heaven path. In the last 10,000 years after the Unfettered One passed through it, no one has been able to overcome it again. Besides the reason that the Unfettered One's strength was too formidable, it's also because the difficulty of the heaven path has been increasing after his departure. The people outside don't want anyone here to leave again. Do you understand?" "Who exactly are you?" The Mink Emperor's expression changed once more, and he said, "You actually know about the people outside. There are definitely less than a handful of people on Profounder Continent who are aware of this." "Who exactly are you?" Elder Mu spoke indifferently as he gazed at the Mink Emperor. "The Undertaker." The Mink Emperor's pupils constricted when he heard this. He gazed at Elder Mu for a short while, and then the Mink Emperor actually bowed slightly while Yang Yi watched with astonishment and bewilderment. After he bowed to Elder Mu, the Mink Emperor said, "According to legend, regardless of whether one is a human, demon beast, or any other race, the corpses of all the experts who perish on the heaven path will be taken by a mysterious expert and given a proper burial so that their souls may rest in peace and attain reincarnation. I thought this was only a legend, but I never imagined that you really existed." Elder Mu smiled, and then he glanced at Yang Yi and said, "I originally intended to foster him into the next Undertaker, but I noticed that the continent wouldn't be needing one in the future." The Mink Emperor fell silent for a short while, and then he said, "Indeed, As soon as he finished speaking, he glanced at Yang Yi and then he said, "Since he's your disciple, then I naturally can't make a move against him. Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, the Mink Emperor bowed once more to Elder Mu, and then he vanished on the spot. After the Mink Emperor left, Yang Yi said, "Elder Mu, what?" Yes, from the beginning until the end, Yang Yi was extremely dazed. The Mink Emperor and Elder Mu clearly didn't know each other. However, the Mink Emperor was so courteous to Elder Mu, and it felt extremely unusual to Yang Yi. "You want to ask why he was so courteous to me?" said Elder Mu with a smile on his face. Yang Yi nodded. "Because even someone as strong as he might need me to bury his corpse." Elder Mu smiled and said, "The heaven path is also called the tomb of experts." Haha, why am I tell you all of this now? Go on, return to the ancient battlefield. Your mother is fated to suffer this tribulation, and you still don't have the ability to resolve this tribulation for her. Go work hard to become stronger, otherwise your mother, you, your younger sister, and countless other people will all die. Yang Yi was just about to ask something when the world around him spun, and his consciousness started to become blurry. When he regained his consciousness once more, he was already at the spot where he'd met the Mink Emperor in the beginning. Yang Yi stood on the spot and glanced at his surroundings. At this moment, he was slightly lost. It wasn't because of his path, and it was his heart instead. Yang Ye's lifetime desire was actually very simple. It was to be together with his family, allow his family to live comfortably, and live happily with his family forever. Attain the authority to control the world. Drinking while enjoying the company of beauties? Eternal life? Prestige? He'd never thought about all of that. Yes, since the very beginning, he'd never sought for much. He merely wanted to live an ordinary life. However, this simple desire was undoubtedly as difficult as ascending the heavens to Yang Yi. Fortunately, he'd understood all of this a very long time ago. His heart was merely lost for a moment. After all, he only had a single choice now, and it was to use the sword in his hand and annihilate all who stood in his way to an ordinary life. As for how many people like this existed, it wasn't important to him any longer. Now, there were only two types of people in this world. Those who were dear to him, and those who were his enemies. Those dear to him had to be protected, whereas enemies naturally had to be annihilated. If the whole world was his enemy, then he would annihilate everyone in the world. Of course, the precondition to this was that he possessed the strength to accomplish it. Now, he had to work hard to gain strength because he could only protect and kill when he was strong. Otherwise, it would all be empty talk if he lacked strength. After a moment of hesitation, Yang Yi didn't choose to return to the Southern Territory right now. Even though he wished for nothing more than to annihilate every single member of the Flower Palace. He knew that if he really went there now, then not only would he be unable to rescue his mother, he would lose his life as well. The Flower Palace wasn't an existence that he could go against right now. Yang Yi glanced at the severed finger on his right hand, and then he took a deep breath and suppressed the surging and violent killing intent in his heart before his figure flashed. He flew swiftly towards the southwest because he intended to go look for the ninth Hell Cold Gale. The ninth Hell was also called the Nether God's Tomb because the Nether God of the Nether Territory was buried here many years ago. A huge battle had once erupted in the ancient battlefield a few 10,000 years ago, and countless experts had fallen during that battle. The Nether God was one of these fallen experts. Boundless energy of death had seeped out from where the Nether God died, and an area of 500 kilometers in the surroundings was instantly transformed into an expanse of barren land. It had become the place that was called the Ninth Hell now. Every single time the Hidden Dragon Pagoda was about to be opened, countless profounders would head to the Ninth Hell, because it was the best place to cultivate besides the Hidden Dragon Pagoda itself. Not only was the cold wind here able to stimulate one's profound energy, but it could also temper the physical body. Most importantly, there was a type of spirit within the Ninth Hell, and these spirits were born from the energy of death that came from the Nether God. Devouring these spirits strengthened the soul. So, every single time the Hidden Dragon Pagoda was about to be opened, practically all the profounders from the Nether Territory would first cultivate at the Ninth Hell. An expanse of pitch-black earth that seemed as if it had been burned laid before Xianxia's eyes, and it was the same even until the limits of his vision. It was clearly midday right now, but the sky above this expanse of pitch-black earth was covered in dark clouds. These dark clouds seemed as if they possessed strange energy, and they were actually able to block the rays of sunlight from descending. A strand of cold wind blew at Xianxia's face, and it instantly made him frown because the cold wind made him feel a wave of discomfort from his soul. The wind didn't target the body but the soul. Xianxia didn't dare act carelessly. With a command in his heart, a strand of sword intent shot out and drove the cold wind away. At the same time, Xianxia's expression had become extremely solemn. Because if he was not wrong, then the cold wind should have probably been emanated by the ninth hell cold gale. Since even the cold wind it emanates is so formidable, then exactly how terrifying is the thing itself? I have to look for it no matter how terrifying it is. Xianxia took a deep breath, and then he executed his movement technique and flashed towards the distance. It was very simple if he wanted to find the ninth hell cold gale. He just had to follow the direction which led to stronger cold winds. Suddenly, Xianxia stopped moving because a ball of green light floated in front of him. The ball of green light was around the size of an adult's head, and it was completely pure green in color. Moreover, the energy contained within it caused Xianxia's heart to thump with desire. This desire had appeared for entirely no reason. It was merely because once he laid eyes on the ball of green light, Xianxia had a feeling that it was beneficial to him. Bang! Right at this moment, a strand of saber chi suddenly flashed into appearance and slashed the green ball of light. A light bang resounded as the ball of light was blasted apart, and then countless little green dots floated out from within it. After that, a white-haired woman suddenly appeared where the green ball of light was, and then she opened her mouth and sucked all of those little green dots into her mouth. The white-haired woman took a deep breath while she revealed an intoxicated expression. After a little while, she seemed to have remembered that someone was beside her, and then she opened her eyes and gazed at Xianxia. She said, "Is this your first time here?" Xianxia returned to his senses and gazed at the white-haired woman. She was around 20 years of age and had an extremely beautiful appearance. Not only did her white hair not diminish the beauty she possessed, but it also added a strange and unusual type of beauty to her. A round and curved blade was hung in a slanted position on her waist. The curved blade was extremely thin and very short, and it was on par with some comparatively longer daggers. Xianxia noticed that the white-haired woman's left hand had always been on the curved blade since she'd appeared here, and it had never left the blade. Is this a habit, or is she on guard against me? Xianxia replied, "Indeed it is." The woman asked another question. "You came from ancient domain city?" Xianxia nodded and said, "I've already answered 2 of your questions, so can I ask you a question as well?" "Go on." The white-haired woman glanced at Xianxia and spoke sparingly. "What was that?" asked Xianxia. "A soul." "A soul? That was a soul?" asked Xianxia with a frown on his face. The white-haired woman glanced indifferently at Xianxia and said, "That a second question?" Xianxia was speechless. The woman asked once more, "You came from ancient domain city?" Xianxia nodded. "There's a person there called Xianxia. Do you know him?" The woman's words question was shocking. Xianxia was stunned. He glanced at the white-haired woman in a serious manner, and he confirmed that he didn't know her. "Could it be that my reputation is so great?" The white-haired woman frowned slightly when she saw Xianxia being stunned on the spot, and she repeated her question. "Do you know him?" Xianxia glanced at the woman with a strange expression, and then he nodded and said, "I do." "Right. Why are you looking for him?" "To kill him," said the white-haired woman. Xianxia blurted out, "Why?" At this moment, Xianxia felt that he was suffering from injustice. After all, he absolutely didn't know this woman, and he believed that she too didn't know him at all. Otherwise, why would she be unable to recognize him while he stood in front of her? Since it was like then there was a problem. Why did the woman want to kill him? The white-haired woman glanced at Xianxia, and then she didn't say anything before she turned around and left. Xianxia was stunned when he witnessed this. Is she that cold and aloof? He didn't hesitate to hurriedly follow her. After all, he hadn't gotten to the bottom of the matter. Even though he wasn't afraid of trouble, he didn't want people looking for trouble with him for no reason. Moreover, it was an expert like this white-haired woman who wanted to look for trouble with him. After all, the saber chi from the woman just now contained 5th-level saber intent. The white-haired woman stopped, turned around to gaze at Yang Yi, and then said, "What are you doing?" Yang Yi was utterly stunned by this question, and he only returned to his senses after quite some time. He said, I want to ask why you intend to kill Yang Yi? Based on what you said earlier, both of you seem to not know each other? So, is there some sort of misunderstanding?" The white-haired woman shook her head and said, "If I don't kill him, then I have to marry him. I don't want to marry him, so I can only kill him." "Why?" Yang Yi was shocked to the point he almost leaped up with surprise. And then he said, "Marry him? WH. Why?" At this moment, Yang Yi felt like his mind wasn't capable of processing all of this. "It's because of my father," the white-haired woman said. "My father is usually right, but I really don't want to marry him. Why don't you return to Ancient Domain City and ask him not to participate in the Hidden Dragon rankings? Tell him to rush back to the Southern Territory and never come to Ancient Domain City again, all right?" Yang Yi was even more dazed by this. He slapped himself on the head, and then he said, I understand a little now. You want to kill Yang Yi because your father wants you to marry Yang Yi? On the other hand, you don't want to marry Yang Yi, so you want to kill him, right?" The woman nodded. "May I ask you why your father asked you to marry Yang Yi?" At this moment, Yang Yi didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. Because someone actually wanted their daughter to marry him. My God! Exactly which great lord is so king? The white-haired woman said, "I don't have to marry Yang Yi, actually. My father merely said that I have to marry the Sword Emperor of this generation. Yang Yi already possesses 5th-level sword intent and the enlightened sword heart. So, but what if Yang Yi can't become the Sword Emperor?" Yang Yi said, "Wouldn't you have killed the wrong person? Wouldn't you feel guilty for doing that? But he possesses the enlightened sword heart. Possessing the enlightened sword heart doesn't mean that one will definitely become the Sword Emperor." Yang Yi interrupted her and said, "Did your father say that the one who possesses the enlightened sword heart is the Sword Emperor? He probably didn't, right? Besides that, if a person who possesses the enlightened sword heart would definitely be able to become the Sword Emperor, then your father would have directly told you to marry Yang Yi and not the Sword Emperor, right?" The white-haired woman frowned lightly as she thought. Yang Yi suddenly said, "Right. May I ask who your father is?" The white-haired woman suddenly gazed at Yang Yi when she heard this, and then saber intent surged out from her entire body. However, the saber intent suddenly surged back into her body when it was about to arrive in front of Yang Yi. Yang Ye's expression changed once more when he witnessed this scene, because he was unable to accomplish that. Who exactly is this woman who seems slightly slow-witted? "I can't tell you that." The white-haired woman finished speaking, glanced at Yang Yi, and then turned around and left. This time, she seemed to not want Yang Yi to continue bothering her. So she sped up, and merely an instant had passed before her figure was already over 30 m away. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment, and then his profound energy surged to activate the gale shows, and he transformed into a black ray of light that chased after her. He didn't want to pester her, but this matter was truly strange, and he kept having the feeling that some sort of plot was being laid out against him. But he wasn't able to put his finger on it. It was merely a feeling. Yang Ye's expression gradually turned solemn because he noticed that even with the boost provided by the Gale Shoes and a Strider Talisman, not only had the gap between him and the white-haired woman showed no signs of being reduced, it was being dragged apart instead. They were 30 m apart earlier, yet they were around 100 m apart now. Moreover, the woman seemed to be completely immune to the cold winds here, and they didn't affect her at all. On the other hand, he had to ceaselessly utilize his sword intent to resist the cold winds. This was naturally not a problem if it was at any other time because it would just consume some of his profound energy. But now, such consumption was extremely serious. Who exactly is she? Even though he hadn't fought her, Yang Yi believed that her strength was absolutely not weaker than the three outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory, and it was even to the extent that she was stronger than them. Besides that, who's that father she speaks of? Why does he want her to marry the Sword Emperor? Am I the Sword Emperor or am I not? It's fine if I'm not the Sword Emperor, but if I am, then what exactly is his objective? After thinking for a long time, Yang Yi was unable to figure out an answer. So he shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Yang Yi took a deep breath as he gazed at the white-haired woman who was going further and further away from him. He knew that if he didn't think of a way and allowed this to continue, then he would be absolutely unable to catch up to her. When he thought up to here, Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He noticed that he seemed to have forgotten something all this while, and it was that the sword control technique could allow him to control a sword and fly. In the past, the consumption of profound energy caused by the sword control technique was too terrifying, and it wasn't worth to utilize at the first heaven realm. But now, he was already at the king realm, and the profound energy within his body couldn't be compared to while he was at the first heaven realm. So, wasn't it the best time to try controlling a sword to fly on it? When he thought up to here, Yang Yi stopped hesitating. A sword transformed into a ray of light that arrived in front of him, and then he leaped up and descended onto it. After that, he issued a command in his heart, and it transformed into a ray of light that shot explosively towards the distance. Bang! Yang Yi wasn't able to react in time because it had suddenly sped up, so the sword flew forward while Yang Yi himself fell to the ground. He smashed heavily onto the ground and smashed a deep hole open where he landed. However, fortunately, his physical body was strong, so such an impact was nothing to him. Yang Yi was extremely delighted as he stood up because he noticed that flying on a sword wasn't a dream. Even though he'd fallen from his sword, it was merely because he hadn't gotten accustomed to it. The sword control technique could really allow him to control a sword and fly on it. Of course, the precondition was that he could get used to the speed. 2 hours later, even though he fell over and over again, the distance between Yang Yi and the white-haired woman grew shorter and shorter. However, the consumption of profound energy to fly with a sword caused Yang Yi to be unable to help but feel slightly ashamed, because if he hadn't been absorbing the energy within energy stones at all times, then his profound energy would have probably been completely exhausted a long time ago. Suddenly, the white-haired woman stopped. She turned around and gazed at Yang Yi, who stood on the sword and was on the verge of falling. And then a strand of surprise and curiosity flashed in her eyes. Once Yang Yi approached and stopped in front of her, she said, "Your method of controlling a sword to fly is extremely ingenious. It seems to be controlled by the heart." Yang Yi took a deep breath of air, and then he nodded and said, "Indeed." The woman nodded, and then she glanced at Yang Yi and said, "Your strength isn't bad, but you shouldn't follow me. The Nether God's tomb is in the distance, and the cold wind there will grow stronger and stronger. Your soul can't endure the assault of the cold wind there. Moreover, there should be numerous fellows from the Nether Territory over there, and they'll act against you if they notice you. Are you not afraid of them?" asked Yang Yi. "Their attacks are very bizarre and impossible to guard against." The woman shook her head and said, "They can't defeat me." Yang Yi was speechless. The white-haired woman glanced at Yang Yi, and then she turned around with the intention of leaving. Yang Yi hurriedly said, "Can we travel together? As you know, it's my first time here, and it'll be extremely dangerous if I move about at random." "You're slightly weak," the white-haired woman said frankly. "Even I will be unable to save you if we encounter those fellows from the Nether Territory. So go back to Ancient Domain City. Otherwise, find a few human profounders to form a group with them." Yang Ye's face darkened. "Am I weak? Fine, I really am weak in the eyes of many, but I'm absolutely not weak amongst my peers." However, the woman before him had called him weak, and Yang Yi really had the urge to ask her for a one-on-one battle. But the displeasure in his heart had instantly vanished when he heard the last few sentences that she spoke. He felt that while she possessed a formidable strength and was slightly slow-witted, she was a good person in heart. Yang Yi was about to say something. Suddenly, the woman frowned, and then a bright and cold glow flashed. Clang! A clear and melodious sound of metal breaking resounded. 3 golden needles that were fine like hair fell to the ground in front of Yang Yi. Yang Ye's face sank as he gazed at the golden needles, and then he turned to gaze at a bald man and an extremely gorgeous woman that had suddenly appeared at the side. Xiao Yushi, you've spoiled my plans again. The Bale man gazed at the white-haired woman and spoke with a gloomy expression. The white-haired woman said, Mo Kwang, we're all humans. There's no need to do that. Mind your own business. The gorgeous woman by Mo Kwang's side suddenly spoke in a sharp voice. Xiao Yushi, your Xiao clan and my Mo clan have always avoided interfering with each other's business. But you've repeatedly obstructed us after coming to the ancient battlefield. What exactly is the meaning of this? The white-haired woman glanced at the two of them, and then she pondered deeply for a short while before she said, If the two of you want to kill me, then why look for such pointless excuses? You've already recruited some help, so just ask them to show themselves. Ha ha! Right at this moment, roaring laughter suddenly resounded before a young man who held a long saber in his hand appeared mysteriously. The young man sized Xiao Yushi up before he said, As expected of someone from the Xiao clan. Looks like you noticed us a long time ago. Eccentric do. Bloodless death. There's no need to hide anymore. As soon as he finished speaking, a man in green robes and a man in black robes appeared behind the white-haired woman. The green-robed man sized her up while a strand of a lustful glow erupted from within his eyes. He said, Tisk, TSK. You're truly a divine figure. Siblings of the Mo clan, we've agreed upon it. Her corpse belongs to me. Ha ha! The swift saber, by Feng, the amorous doctor of poisons, eccentric do, and the sword that leaves no blood, bloodless death. Xiao Yushi glanced at the 3 of them before she said, I never expected that they would even get the 3 of you. The reputation of these 3 fellows could be said to be on par with the 3 outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory, but it was a bad reputation. While he was at the 7th rank of the King Realm, the swift saber by Feng had once made a spirit realm expert unable to fight back against him and tortured that spirit realm expert to death by constantly executing 1,000 slashes in every single breath of time. Since that battle came to an end, Bai Feng attained the reputation of being the swift saber. Not to mention personally experiencing it. Even hearing about such speed was astounding. The doctor of poison, eccentric do, could be said to be infamous because he specialized in playing with women, and they weren't even living women. They were dead. His strength wasn't especially formidable, but his mysterious and undetectable poison techniques caused others to shudder in horror from just hearing about it. In the past, a city governor had issued a warrant for his death because he'd killed and played with that city governor's concubine. In his rage, he poisoned the entire population of over 1 million in the city. Since then, he vanished from the view of the public, and he hadn't made another appearance. Of course, he didn't want to vanish, but some extraordinary experts had been infuriated by his actions, and they took joint action to pursue him. So he had no choice but to vanish. As for bloodless death, he was an assassin. He could be said to be a legend in the world of assassins, because he only assassinated targets who were above his realm of cultivation. In other words, he only accepted missions with targets that possessed a cultivation that was a realm above his own. According to incomplete statistics, he'd assassinated over 100 spirit realm experts while at the King Realm. But this time, he'd come to assassinate Xiao Yushi, who was at the same realm of cultivation as himself. Xiao Yushi's expression was solemn because the strength of her opponents was extremely formidable, and they were even very large in number. On the other hand, Yang Yi was extremely calm because he didn't know them at all. Of course, he wouldn't be afraid even if he did. I'm really curious. Exactly what price did they pay to actually be able to recruit the 3 of you? Said Xiao Yushi. It's naturally something that we desire. Bai Feng laughed coldly and said, Maiden Xiao, everyone says that you're the future Saber Exalt of the continent, and I'm very disgruntled by that. So, I've wanted to fight you for a long time and see who exactly is the future Saber Exalt. Now, I finally have the chance. Bai Feng, I didn't hire you to compete for a title with her. Meanwhile, Mo Kuang spoke in a low voice. I know you're proud and think that your saber technique is inferior to no one. However, I have to tell you that her saber intent was already at the peak of the 6th level a year ago. Otherwise, would I pay such a huge price to hire the three of you? The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed when they heard Mo Kuang. Even Xianxia was shocked as well. This seemingly slow-witted woman is actually so formidable. Her saber intent was at the peak of the 6th level a year ago. When he thought up to here, Xianxia felt slightly embarrassed. No wonder she said, I'm slightly weak just now. So, she wasn't speaking recklessly. She had the right to say that, peak 6th level saber intent. These words caused Bai Feng's expression to become unsightly. After all, he was already considered an extraordinary genius in the saber Dao, yet he merely possessed 5th level saber intent. On the other hand, she was already at the peak of the 6th level saber intent a year ago. This was truly a slap to the face for him. As expected of the quasi-saber exalt, Bloodless Death suddenly spoke in a low voice. I originally didn't intend to become enemies with you. Unfortunately, I'm unable to refuse the compensation they provided. So you should just die. As soon as he finished speaking, Bloodless Death suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, he'd appeared in front of Xiao Yushi. However, right at this moment, a cold glow flashed. Hiss! Bloodless Death's figure returned to where he stood just now. And the only difference was that a faint blood-red mark had appeared on his neck. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed once more when they noticed this scene. Especially Bai Feng, because that casual attack from Xiao Yushi was actually faster than his quickest attack. Xiao Yushi gazed at the siblings from the Mo clan, and then she pointed at Yang Yi and said, This enmity is between our clans, and it's unrelated to him. So, can you let him leave? No! It was Bai Feng who spoke these words. Bai Feng revealed a gloomy expression as he said, Everyone, if the news that the 5 of us had joined forces against a woman were to spread, then how would we continue living in the continent? So, this kid must die. Indeed, Eccentric Du agreed. This fellow can't leave with his life. Otherwise, if the Mo clan were to find out, then we'll probably have to spend the rest of our lives facing endless pursuit. Bloodless Death didn't say anything, and he just gazed at Yang Yi. Xiao Yushi frowned, and then she gazed at Yang Yi and said, Sorry for dragging you into this. Just flee if you have the chance. You have a good chance of fleeing with that profound technique of sword control that you possess. Yang Yi asked with an astounded expression. You intend to fight all 5 of them on your own? Every single one of them was at the peak of the King realm. Moreover, they were existences who could surmount their realms of cultivation to do battle. Yet this woman actually wanted to fight all 5 of them by herself. Not even someone with 6th level saber intent could act so recklessly. How can those who use the saber shrink back from battle? Said Xiao Yushi as her brows raised. Yang Yi was filled with great respect for her and said, Even though I don't agree with your actions, I have no choice but to admit that your actions are worthy of my respect. When he spoke up to hear, Yang Yi turned to gaze at Mo Kuang and said, It was you who attacked with those 3 needles just now, right? So what if it was? Mo Kuang spoke with a ferocious voice. Kid, could it be that you want to kill me? Indeed. Yang Yi nodded, and then he said, I, with a strength at the 5th rank of the King realm, challenge you to a one-on-one battle. Do you dare to accept it? Everyone was stunned by this. Mo Kuang recovered from his shock, and then he roared with laughter. He laughed for a while before he said, You want a one-on-one battle with me? A piece of trash at the 5th rank of the King realm is challenging me to a one-on-one battle? Kid, are you even worthy of it? Just tell me if you dare or don't, said Yang Yi in an indifferent tone. A wisp of ghastly killing intent flashed in Mo Kuang's eyes. Right when he was about to make a move, the gorgeous woman by his side had suddenly stepped forward, and she said, Big brother, there's no need for you to act against a mere 5th rank King realm profounder. As she spoke, her figure instantly arrived in front of Yang Yi, and then she didn't attack but started dancing instead. The woman wore very revealing clothes, and she merely wore a few layers of thin lace that covered a few important parts of her body. Actually, the lace could be said to be non-existent because it was transparent. To a certain extent, it was equivalent to her being without any clothes. The woman had an extremely good figure. She had a voluptuous chest and a plump behind. Coupled with the faint seduction that she exuded, it simply caused one's blood to burn. The woman's dance was extremely hot, and she even performed some extremely stirring moves as she danced. It caused the blood of all the men in the surroundings to burn. Of course, this wasn't a simple dance. At the moment that the woman had started to dance, the scene before Xianxia's eyes had changed. There was a luxurious hall with naked beauties. They were singing and chatting happily in a mess of booze and sweat. The heavenly demon dance. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings had turned solemn when they witnessed this dance. Because this dance had once caused a monarch realm expert to fall into an illusion and become trapped within it. A monarch realm expert. How could one who was able to become a monarch realm expert possess a weak will and mind? However, such a figure had lost himself to the heavenly demon dance. It could be said that so long as one possessed desire, then it was practically impossible to resist the heavenly demon dance. Of course, no matter how formidable a cultivation technique was, it was useless if it was executed by a weakling. So, the strength of the dance depended on the dancer. Mo Kuang was very relaxed because he hadn't seen anyone in the same realm of cultivation being able to resist this dance of his younger sisters. Xiao Yushi had recognized the origins of this dance as well, and she couldn't help but frown when she noticed Xianxia's eyes seemed to show that he was gradually losing himself in the dance. Hiss! Right when she intended to act, a strand of light suddenly flashed, and then the gorgeous woman's head flew into the sky while leaving a string of fresh blood behind it. Everyone was dumbstruck by this scene. Yang Yi shook his head as he gazed at the gorgeous woman's head that had its eyes opened wide. Because the woman really didn't know what was good for her. She'd actually utilized an illusion technique in front of him. How could an illusion affect him when he possessed 6th level slaughter sword intent and the enlightened sword heart? At the very least, this woman wasn't capable of affecting him. Xiao Yushi took a deep glance at Yang Yi and remained silent. Yang Yi waved the sword in his hand, and then he gazed at Mo Kuang and said, "My offer from before still stands. So how about we fight one-on-one?" "MOU." Mo Kuang suddenly roared furiously like a wild beast, and he instantly howled angrily when he heard Yang Yi. "You killed my little sister. Ah, I'll kill your entire family." As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Kuang's figure flashed explosively towards Yang Yi. Yang Ye's gaze turned completely icy cold. The thing he hated the most was others threatening his family. So, Mo Kuang had to die today. Yang Yi didn't hesitate to draw his sword and slash. A strand of golden sword chi shot forward explosively, and it was swift like a bolt of lightning. 5th level sword intent. Bai Feng's expression changed violently. Obviously, he hadn't expected that this profounder who was merely at the 5th rank of the King Realm would have actually comprehended 5th level sword intent. On the other hand, Xiao Yushi's eyes drooped, and no one knew what she was thinking. When he saw this attack, Mo Kuang, who just arrived in front of Yang Yi, was astounded in his heart. He hurriedly stopped his figure, and then he let out a fierce shout as he smashed his palm towards Yang Ye's golden sword chi. Bang! An enormous bang resounded. After that, the expressions of Bai Feng, bloodless death, and eccentric Du had changed, because a hole had suddenly appeared on Mo Kuang's left chest. "Who exactly are you?" Mo Kuang gazed at Yang Yi while he spoke in a low voice. "Guess it yourself." Yang Yi chuckled lightly as he spoke. It caused Mo Kuang's expression to turn savage, and he was almost unable to restrain himself from attacking Yang Yi. According to rumor, a quasi-sword emperor has appeared in the Southern Territory. He has comprehended 5th level sword intent before the age of 20, and even possesses the enlightened sword heart. Meanwhile, Bloodless Death suddenly said, "I presume you're that quasi-sword emperor? Mo, you tried to utilize an illusion technique like the heavenly demon dance in front of you, who possesses the enlightened sword heart." "Haha." She probably can't rest in her grave. You're Yang Yi? Said Mo Kuang with an astonished tone. Yang Yi glanced at all of them and then he said, Actually, I really dislike trouble, and I really didn't want to interfere in the enmity of others. However, it can't be helped. This fellow, Mo Kuang, launched a lethal attack against me without even saying a single word, whereas all of you wanted to kill me to keep me silent. Since it's like that, then I have no choice to but kill all of you. How arrogant! Bai Feng said coldly, Yang Yi, who do you think you are? You're just a trash sword cultivator from a savage area. Do you really think you're invincible? Which one of us can't surmount a realm of cultivation to do battle? Yet you intend to surmount ranks of cultivation to kill us? You're really dreaming. Eccentric Du snickered. Tisk, TSK. The Quasi-Sword Emperor and Quasi-Saber Exalt. They're actually together. TSK, TSK. Once I kill the two of you, I'll definitely be renowned throughout the continent. Ha ha! Yang Yi shrugged, and then he gazed at Xiao Yushi and said, Let's deal with the matter between us later. Let's join forces for now. Alright? Xiao Yushi glanced at Yang Yi, and then she said, Alright. Attack together. Meanwhile, Mo Kuang gave the order. Alas! Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly sighed and said, I asked all of you to fight me one-on-one, yet you refused and insist on a group battle. Since it's like that, then I won't hold back. Come out here. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yi waved his right hand, and then 7 dark beasts instantly appeared here. Ow! The dark beasts howled in unison, and they revealed a ferocious glow in their eyes as they gazed at Mo Kuang and the others. They were intolerably hungry for blood. When they witnessed this scene, it wasn't just Mo Kuang and the others who were shocked. Even Xiao Yushi was shocked by it. Kill! Yang Yi didn't hesitate to give the order. As soon as he finished speaking, the 7 Peak King rank dark beasts didn't hesitate to pounce at Mo Kuang and the others. Ha ha! Eccentric Du won't be accompanying all of you. Ha ha! Suddenly, Eccentric Du roared with laughter, and then his figure flashed towards the distance. When he heard this, Mo Kuang was angered to the point of almost spitting blood. However, right at this moment, Bai Feng suddenly said, Brother Mo, I'm powerless to help you in this matter. I'll be leaving first, and I'll apologize to Brother Mo on another day. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Feng's figure flashed towards the distance. Mo Kuang's expression became unsightly, and then he looked towards Bloodless Death, who was the only one left. You're leaving as well? Bloodless Death nodded, and then his figure flashed and vanished mysteriously on the spot. Yang Yi didn't pursue them because he wasn't able to catch up to them. With the strengths they possessed, they could still escape even if they couldn't defeat him. The 7 dark beasts encircled Mo Kuang under Yang Ye's command, so it could be said that it was impossible for Mo Kuang to flee now. Ha ha ha! Mo Kuang suddenly started roaring with laughter, and then he gazed at Xiao Yushi and said, If I were you, I would pursue Eccentric Du right now. You're probably still unaware of it, right? He scattered Sulenchant powder in the air as soon as he made an appearance just now. Maiden Xiao, you've probably heard of Sulenchant powder, right? Ha ha! Xiao Yushi's expression changed when she heard Mo Kuang, and then she closed her eyes slightly. After a short moment, her eyes suddenly opened, and a strand of ghastly killing intent that was seemingly material had appeared in her eyes. She drew her saber and slashed, and a snow-white strand of saber chi tore through space and instantly arrived in front of Mo Kuang before it pierced through his chest. Yang Ye's expression changed violently. Mo Kuang spoke softly with disbelief before he died. 7th level saber intent. After she instantly annihilated Mo Kuang with a single strike of her saber, Xiao Yushi's figure flashed and transformed into a white shadow that shot explosively towards the direction Eccentric Du had fled towards. Her speed was swift like a bolt of lightning, and strands of sharp whistles even resounded wherever she passed. Yang Yi gestured with his right hand, and the spatial rings on Mo Kuang and Mo Yu's hands flew into his palm. After that, his figure flashed and pursued Xiao Yushi, because he'd noticed that her expression was very unusual when she left, and when he associated it with what Mo Kuang had just said. Yang Yi didn't hesitate to pursue her swiftly. Even though he didn't know what sort of poison Sulanchant powder was, since it was able to make Xiao Yushi become so anxious, then it was definitely not an ordinary poison. Both Yang Yi and Xiao Yushi might have been poison, so it would be too late if they didn't chase eccentric Du down right now and obtain the antidote from him. Even though he didn't notice any discomfort in his body, he didn't dare to be careless. Yang Ye's speed could be said to be extremely swift when he flew on a sword, and he quickly caught up with Xiao Yushi. However, his expression changed once more when he did, because eccentric Du was letting out heartrending shrill cries in front of Xiao Yushi. At this moment, his limbs had been chopped off, and Xiao Yushi was still swinging her saber at eccentric Du. Every single wave of her curved saber caused a thread of blood to spray from eccentric Du's body, and in less than a few breaths of time, there were a few thousand scars that were fine like hairs on eccentric Du's body. Yang Yi glanced at Xiao Yushi, and he was shocked in his heart. He hadn't imagined that this woman wasn't inferior to him at all when it came to acting ruthlessly. Xiao Yushi's hand stopped for a moment. She gazed at eccentric Du, who even had scars covering his entire face, and then she said in a low voice, "The antidote." "There is no antidote. Bitch. Kill me if you can." "Ah!" Eccentric Du roared and howled. He'd heard of people being cut and hacked to death, but he'd never witnessed it in the past. Now, he'd experienced it firsthand. A strand of cold light flashed. Eccentric Du's eyes instantly turned crimson red. "Ah!" Eccentric Du instantly let out a hysterical and shrill cry when his eyes were blinded by her, and then he howled, "Bitch! Bitch! Kill me if you can. Kill me!" A strand of cold light flashed in Xiao Yushi's eyes, and then eccentric Du's ears instantly flew off from his face. The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched when he witnessed this scene. What a decisive woman! A heartrending and shrill cry resounded from eccentric Du again, and he shouted for a while before he suddenly said, "Sulanchant powder is created from a mixture of a few thousands of aphrodisiacs and over 100 strong spirit herbs. It's utterly impossible to cure without the exchange of yin and yang with someone from the other gender. Haha. Maiden Xiao, you're pure and cold as ice, so you've probably not done it with a man, right? Haha. You'll get to experience a man today. Haha. Hiss. Eccentric Du's head flew up into the air, while a strand of blood sprayed behind it. After she killed eccentric Du, Xiao Yushi closed her eyes slightly while the profound energy within her body surged violently. And then strands of extremely fierce and sharp saber intent surged explosively and incessantly from within her body. Yang Yi frowned when he witnessed this scene. Earlier, his attention was drawn by the miserable state eccentric Du was in, so he hadn't paid any attention to Xiao Yushi. Now, when he noticed how she looked, he finally realized that she was in a bad state, because her face was completely red as if it was on the verge of bursting into flames, and her delicate figure had actually started to tremble lightly. "What's wrong?" asked Yang Yi. Xiao Yushi swiftly opened her eyes upon hearing this, and then she gazed at Yang Yi for a while before she said, "You're fine. What do you mean?" Yang Yi was slightly dazed. "Why haven't you been poisoned?" said Xiao Yushi in a low voice. Yang Yi instantly came to a sudden realization. Right, why am I not poisoned? Why am I fine? In next to no time, Yang Yi thought of a possibility, and it was the tiny vortex, because he was truly unable to think of any other possibilities besides the tiny vortex. Right at this moment, Xiao Yushi suddenly said, "Leave!" Yang Yi recalled what eccentric Du had said earlier, and then he glanced at her before he sighed lightly. After that, the turned around and flashed towards the distance, and it wasn't long before he vanished from her field of vision. It wasn't that he was cold-blooded, and it was instead because Xiao Yushi had aroused killing intent towards him. So, if he continued staying here, then she would definitely disregard everything in an effort to kill him. Yang Yi refused to do something that was arduous but thankless. The last trace of clarity in Xiao Yushi's eyes vanished when she saw Yang Yi leave, and then the curved blade in her hand suddenly escaped her grasp and transformed into a ray of light that shot towards her neck. She was just that resolute. In a concealed cave, Yang Yi shook his head and smiled as he gazed at Xiao Yushi, and then he said in a low voice, I never expected that I, Yang Yi, would be the good guy one day. He'd naturally not left just now because he had a good impression of Xiao Yushi. It would be fine if he didn't have the ability to rescue her, but it just so happened that he did. As always, it was better to have another friend than another enemy, especially when it was in the ancient battlefield and under the circumstances where numerous people were hostile towards him. So, having another expert as a friend was especially important to him. Of course, the precondition was that he had a good impression of the person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have saved her and would have taken advantage of the situation instead. Yang Yi shook his head, and then he walked slowly over to Xiao Yushi, and he felt his breath being taken away as he gazed at her face that revealed an expression of pain. Only when he gazed carefully at her did he notice that Xiao Yushi's appearance was actually not inferior to Su Qingshi and Xianxia. She had perfect and exquisite features, and when it was coupled with her snow-white hair, she exuded a form of unique beauty. Yang Yi couldn't deny that she was extremely attractive. Yang Yi suppressed the emotions in his heart before he slowly placed his palm onto her stomach, and then the profound energy within his body surged before threads of golden profound energy flowed slowly into Xiao Yushi's body. 2 hours later, Xiao Yushi opened her eyes slowly. She was first stunned, and then she stood up and hurriedly looked at herself. She instantly heaved a sigh of relief when she noticed that her clothes were intact, and then she gazed at Yang Yi, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, and said, You saved me? Yang Yi smiled. Who else could it have been? Thank you. Xiao Yushi glanced at Yang Yi, and then she hesitated for a moment and asked, How did you save me? It's a secret. Yang Yi smiled and said, It's a secret technique of mine that I can't tell you about. In any case, you're fine now and no one took advantage of you. Isn't that the most important? Xiao Yushi nodded, and then she walked over to Yang Yi and sat down cross-legged in front of him before she started staring at him. This caused Yang Yi to feel uncomfortable, and he said, What are you looking at me for? Is there something on my face? Xiao Yushi shook her head and said, No. I just want to see exactly what sort of person the man that my father wants me to marry is. Even though your appearance isn't really great, your character isn't bad because you didn't take advantage of the situation. What does she mean by my appearance isn't really great? Yang Yi rolled his eyes. Can't this fellow be a little tactful? Yang Yi said, You keep speaking about your father. I'm really curious about who exactly your father is. Why does he want you to marry the Sword Emperor? Right, allow me to state in advance. Someone said that it's absolutely impossible for me to be the Sword Emperor. So, it's absolutely impossible for me to be the person who you have to marry. You've already attained 6th level sword intent, right? Asked Xiao Yushi. Yang Yi didn't conceal it from her and nodded. She asked another question. Moreover, you possess the enlightened sword heart, right? Yang Yi nodded once more. Then it's right. Xiao Yushi said, Even though the sword intent of some of the sword cultivators I know are superior to you, they don't possess the enlightened sword heart. So, you're definitely the sword emperor of the present age. As for who my father is, I'm sorry, but I can't tell you, because obtaining such knowledge might be harmful to you. Yang Yi shrugged, and then he released a strand of slaughter sword intent. When she noticed the strand of slaughter sword intent, Xiao Yushi frowned while a wisp of bewilderment flashed in her eyes. She said with a puzzled expression, How could this be possible? You've attained the enlightened sword heart, yet you possess slaughter sword intent. What exactly is going on? What else? Yang Yi said, This proves that I'm not the sword emperor of the present age. So, don't kill me, alright? Others will kill you even if I don't. Xiao Yushi said, At this moment, the Mo clan is probably already aware that we killed that pair of siblings from the Mo clan, and they've probably dispatched experts to the ancient battlefield. So be it. Yang Yi didn't mind at all, and he said, So long as it isn't an Exalt Realm expert, then do we have to be afraid? She suddenly asked, What do you think of my strength? Yang Yi thought for a moment before he said with a serious expression, It's very strong. You're the strongest I've seen besides Han Yu and Mo Ku. The experts they dispatch will definitely be stronger than me. Xiaoyushi said, "The resources and reserves of a hidden clan isn't something that you can imagine." A hidden clan? Yang Yi frowned and said, "What's that? Is it stronger than a 9th rank sect?" Xiaoyushi shook her head slightly and said, "They can't be said to be stronger than a 9th rank sect, but they can't be said to be weaker as well. You've heard about the strength of bloodlines, right?" Yang Yi nodded. He'd naturally heard of it because the little fellow possessed it. Hidden clans are clans that possess the bloodline of a Saint Realm expert, Xiaoyushi said in a heavy voice. The bloodline of all experts who attain the Saint Realm would undergo a transformation, and it would possess a special ability that's mysterious and unfathomable. Moreover, their descendants would be able to cultivate much faster than ordinary people. If both possessed the same level of natural talent, then those with such bloodlines would be able to spend a month to obtain what the other would take a year to accomplish. Then why were they so weak? Yang Yi was puzzled. "Look, I instantly annihilated her with a single strike of my sword while you did the same to Mo Kuang. Their bloodline doesn't seem to be very strong." Xiaoyushi's eyelids twitched, and then she said, "They were careless, and they weren't direct line descendants of the Mo clan. So the bloodline they possessed wasn't pure. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been to the extent that they hadn't even comprehended their innate divine ability." Yang Yi shook his head and said, "Tell me how strong the person they dispatch will be, so that I can mentally prepare myself." "You don't have to worry because I'll be with you." Xiaoyushi glanced at Yang Yi and spoke softly. Yang Yi was stunned on the spot. Xiaoyushi seemed to realize that her words could be interpreted in a different manner, and she instantly revealed a slightly uncomfortable expression before she turned her head to the side. After a short while, and right when the atmosphere between them was slightly embarrassing, she said, "It's very likely for the Mo clan to dispatch Mo Qingyu. You absolutely must not fight her if you encounter her while you're by yourself. She's extremely strong." "Even stronger than you?" asked Yang Yi. Xiaoyushi shook her head and said, "I don't know. I've only fought her once, and both of us didn't go all out during that battle. So, even I don't know how strong she is. Right, she uses the sword as well, and she attained the peak of the 7th level of sword intent last year. Moreover, she has comprehended wind intent as well, and both her movement technique and the speed of her sword are extremely terrifying." The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched. At this moment, he finally understood what the words, "there's always someone stronger," meant. Before this, he'd felt that his natural talent in the sword Dao was already sufficiently monstrous, but only now did he realize that he was looking up at the world from within a well. When she saw the expression on Yang Ye's face, Xiaoyushi thought that he'd suffered a blow to his confidence, and she hesitated for a moment before she said in a light voice, "There's no need to underestimate your own ability. Even though the level of your sword intent isn't as high as hers, you possessed the enlightened sword heart. Just that alone allows you to stand at an invincible position amongst your peers." Yang Yi smiled, and then he said, "Let's not talk about that. Right, why were those siblings from the Mo clan trying to kill you?" Even though he'd offended a formidable enemy, Yang Yi wasn't afraid at all. 7th level sword intent? Not only was he unafraid, but he was also slightly itching to fight her instead, because he would definitely obtain a huge amount of comprehension if he fought a genius in the sword Dao. Xiaoyushi glanced at Yang Yi, and then she said, "Telling you would only bring harm to you. Then don't tell me." Yang Yi smiled and said, "All right, now I need to ask you about something. Do you know where the 9th Hell-Cold Gale is?" After he witnessed the situation that his mother was in, Yang Yi urgently desired to become strong. Now, he finally understood this principle of possessing strength was equivalent to possessing everything. Now, he only wanted to become strong. Xiaoyushi frowned and said, "How do you know about that?" Yang Yi said, "I naturally have my own methods. Just tell me if you know about it or not." Xiaoyushi fell silent for a while before she said, "It should be within the Nether God's tomb because all the cold wind comes from within the tomb." When she spoke up to hear, she gazed at Yang Yi and said with a serious expression, "You wouldn't be thinking of obtaining it, right?" Yang Yi didn't conceal his intentions from her, and he nodded and said, "I need it." Xianxia said solemnly. You will die. The ninth hell cold gale is a natural treasure of extreme and cold properties. Not only is it lethally harmful to the body, it even strikes the soul. It's utterly impossible for you to subdue it. No, it should be said that you're utterly unable to approach it at all. Xianxia smiled and said, I have to give it a try or I'll never be satisfied. Xianxia frowned as she asked, You want back down no matter what? Xianxia nodded. Xianxia, then we'll go together. Xianxia was stunned, and then he said with a puzzled expression, Why? Because you don't know the way to the Nether God's tomb. She glanced at Xianxia, and then she stood up and walked slowly out of the cave. Xianxia was stunned on the spot. What sort of reason is that? After that, he shook his head and smiled before he flashed off to follow her. As soon as they left the cave, Xianxia was stunned once more because almost 100 human profounders had gathered outside the cave. It wasn't just them. There were over 30 youths from the devil race as well. Moreover, there were a few dozes corpses on the ground as well. There were some corpses of youths from the devil race amongst them, but most were human. The expressions of those youths from the devil race had instantly changed upon noticing Xianxia and Xianxia. They didn't know Xianxia, but they knew Xianxia. He was someone that could fight their big brother. Even though they looked down upon humans, even proud fellows like them had no choice but to admit that they were absolutely not a match for Xianxia. On the other hand, the human profounders were delighted because the youths from the devil race were nothing to be feared with Xianxia here. Xianxia asked Xianxia, What's going on? Xianxia glanced at the group of human profounders before she said, They are probably fighting for the souls here. Oh, said Xianxia. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia turned around and walked towards the side. Help the human profounders? What a joke. Xianxia wasn't that kind because their fate wasn't related to him at all. Moreover, he hadn't forgotten how they'd acted at Ancient Domain City that day. Xianxia glanced at Xianxia, and then she didn't say a thing and just followed him. Xianxia was slightly surprised when he sensed that she'd followed him, because based on her character, it was very likely that she would lend a hand to save those human profounders. But it just so happened that she'd listen to him and follow him. What exactly is going on with her? Xianxia was puzzled. When they saw Xianxia and Xianxia leave just like that, the group from the devil race and human race were both stunned. They're leaving just like that? Brother Yang, wait! The human profounders were instantly anxious when they saw Xianxia and Xianxia were going further and further away, and a human profounder hurriedly stepped forward and called out to Xianxia. Brother Yang, I'm an elite disciple from a 4th-rank sect of the Eastern Territory, the Heaven's Courtyard sect's Ling Feng. I formed a group with some friends with the intention of training at the 9th Hell, yet I never expected that. The man called Ling Feng was speaking halfway when Xianxia suddenly stopped moving, and then he turned around and interrupted Ling Feng. You want me to help all of you, right? Ling Feng was stunned, and then he was delighted and said, Indeed. Of course, we won't make Brother Yang help for nothing, and we'll provide satisfactory compensation after the deed is done. Oh! Xianxia's brows raised as he chuckled. What compensation? Ling Feng and the others behind him revealed delighted expressions when they noticed that Xianxia was interested, and then Ling Feng hesitated before he said, 10 mid-grade talismans and 1,000 energy stones. All right. The group behind Ling Feng was instantly displeased when they heard him. 1,000 energy stones weren't a big deal because they could easily accumulate it collectively. However, 10 mid-grade talismans were something that they weren't willing to give up. After all, even though they were disciples of large sects and clans, 10 mid-grade talismans were still extremely precious to them. So, it naturally was painful to them if they had to jointly produce such an amount of mid-grade talismans. 10 mid-grade talismans and 1,000 energy stones. Are they trying to make a beggar go away? Xianxia was slightly speechless, and he was just about to speak when a man stood forward and spoke with a displeased tone. Xianxia, we're all humans, so we should be united. Are you not ashamed to ask for compensation to save others? Exactly. We're all humans. Xianxia, help us out and we'll help you in the future. Haha. Brother Yang, Let's drink until we drop in the sleepless restaurant of ancient domain city once the matter here is dealt with. Alright? It's settled. We'll drink until we drop once these bastards from the devil race are dealt with. Haha! The youths of the devil race revealed unsightly expressions when they heard these human profounders. Earlier, these humans had been extremely cautious before them. But now, the humans seemed to be very pleased with themselves, as if all of them from the devil territory would definitely perish. If they weren't worried about Xianxia who stood at the side, they would have attacked by now. Xianxia glanced at them, and then she remained silent, even though she didn't say anything, but a wisp of disdain flashed in her eyes. Xianxia was speechless. Yes, he was utterly speechless. He hadn't expected that there were so numerous shameless fellows amongst the human race. Do these fellows take me to be an idiot, or are they idiots? Xianxia glanced at them before he gazed at Xianxia and said, "Let's go." He'd originally intended to kill these youths from the devil race. After all, he didn't have a good impression of them, and killing them would allow him to leave a good impression in the hearts of these human profounders. However, he decisively abandoned this thought when he heard those human profounders. No, it should be said that he wanted to kill these human profounders as well. However, Xianxia didn't do it in the end because it was better to let them fight amongst themselves. When he saw Xianxia and Xianxia leave once more, a wisp of a gloomy expression flashed in Ling Feng's eyes, and then he gazed at the members of the devil race and said, "Once we fight to the point both our groups are injured, those souls will definitely be seized by Xianxia. Let's join forces to deal with him before we fight amongst ourselves. What do you think?" The members of the devil race were instantly tempted by this, because when compared to these human profounders, they were much more afraid of Xianxia. After all, if Xianxia did make an appearance after they fought to the point both their groups were heavily injured, then they would probably perish. So, when he thought up to here, the youth in the lead of the group from the devil territory nodded and said, "All right." Meanwhile, Xianxia and Xianxia stopped moving, and then they turned around. Xianxia glanced at the human profounders and the youths from the devil territory who had joined forces, and then he said, "Needless to say, I, Xianxia, am really unlucky. Lending a hand would cause me trouble, but not lending a hand would cause me trouble as well. Motherfuckers, do you think you can bully me?" As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia's figure suddenly vanished on the spot, and then he instantly arrived in front of Ling Feng before he drew his sword and slashed. Everyone here was stunned when they saw Xianxia attack abruptly. Obviously, they hadn't imagined that Xianxia would actually dare to attack while facing so many people. Ling Feng was instantly horrified when Xianxia arrived in front of him, because Xianxia's speed was truly too swift. It was swift to the point that he wasn't even able to see Xianxia's figure clearly. Right when Ling Feng was about to turn around and flee, he suddenly felt coldness come from his neck. After that, there was nothing after that because his head had flown into the sky. After he killed Ling Feng, Xianxia didn't hold back, and he shot explosively into the group of human profounders before his 5th-level sword intent surged out as his sword danced about swiftly. Since he intended to kill them, then he intended to slaughter them until the end and leave no survivors. Everyone here is stunned. What is he trying to do? Isn't he afraid of becoming the common enemy of all humans? They didn't have the time to ponder on this question because Xianxia's sword was dancing about, and the heads of over 30 profounders had left their bodies in less than a few breaths of time. Every single one of these profounders had been directly annihilated by a single strike of his sword. After he killed over 30 of them, the human profounders had finally recovered from their shock, and then they immediately fled madly towards the surroundings. They didn't choose to fight because Xianxia was like an invincible god of death right now, and every single swing of his sword reaped a life. Coupled with the fact that those youths from the devil race were still standing at the side, how could they dare to fight him? As they gazed at Xianxia, who was violently annihilating those human profounders, the group from the devil race instantly revealed a fearful expression. Xianxia's ruthlessness and formidable strength had aroused some fear in them. On the other hand, Xianxia took a deep glance at Xianxia. She finally had a slight understanding of his character. He was a man that would never compromise and killed decisively. Yang Yi was unable to annihilate all of them in the end because they'd relied on their high-ranked movement techniques to seize the opportunity created by the chaos here and fled. Yang Yi, you're dead. You're dead. You'll become the common enemy of all humans. You're dead. Ah, my sect will take revenge for me. Just you wait, Yang Yi. Just you wait. I'll make living worse than death for you. Yang Yi, I'll definitely repay you 100-fold for this. Yang Yi smiled with disdain as he watched them flee. If he didn't intend to search for the 9th Hell-Cold Gale, then he would have pursued every single member of this ragtag group and annihilate all of those bastards. Yang Yi swung his sword lightly as he turned to gaze at the group from the devil race, and then a cold light flashed in his eyes. Right at this moment, the youth in the lead walked forward before he moved his fingers slightly. After that, around 50+ green balls of light surged out from a spatial ring on his finger. After he did all of this youth and all the other youths of the devil race instantly gazed at Yang Yi. At this moment, there was no fear or terror in their eyes, and there was only determination. They'd handed the souls over, so if Yang Yi still insisted on killing them, then they would naturally fight him to the end. Yang Yi glanced at those green balls of lightning, and then he hesitated for a while before he gazed at the group from the devil race and said, "Leave!" Those youths instantly heaved sighs of relief when they heard this. Even though they had the advantage in numbers, they weren't sure of their success when they were facing Yang Yi. After all, Yang Yi's sword intent was at the peak of the 5th level. Most importantly, he had a flying dark beast, so he could run even if he couldn't overcome them in battle. Yang Yi said as he watched them leave, "What a pity." He naturally wanted to annihilate every single one of these fellows from the devil race. After all, they definitely possessed a good amount of treasures. However, when he saw the expressions they had in their eyes, Yang Yi knew that he would definitely have to pay a certain price if he wanted to kill them all. This price would be that he might lose a few Peak King Realm dark beasts. After all, Yang Yi wasn't a god, and it was impossible for him to fight by himself against that many profounders from the devil race who were resolved to fight to the death. These youths from the devil race were unlike those human profounders. The human profounders only thought of themselves when they encountered danger, and they would flee for their own lives and completely disregard the fate of their other companions. However, the youths of the devil race wouldn't act in such a way. Their expressions told Yang Yi that if he were to attack them, then they would live and die together. It was exactly because of this that Yang Yi had no choice but to let them leave. Meanwhile, Xiao Yushi, who'd remained silent until now, had spoken abruptly. "You'll make countless enemies by acting like that." Yang Yi smiled, and then he put away the spatial rings of those human profounders who he'd killed. After that, he said, "It doesn't matter. I've been the common enemy of all the profounders in the younger generation of the Southern Territory. So what if a few more territories are added to that?" Xiao Yushi pondered deeply for a moment, and then she glanced at Yang Yi and said, "Now I think that it's impossible for you to become the Sword Emperor because the Sword Emperor wouldn't become the common enemy of everyone." "It doesn't matter." Yang Yi smiled and said, "I've never thought of becoming the Sword Emperor. The person that wants that position can take it." Xiao Yushi glanced at Yang Yi, and then she fell silent. Yang Yi paid no further attention to her. Presently, he had something even more important to do, and it was to look through his spoils from the battle. He hadn't even taken a look at the spatial rings of those siblings from the Mo clan and eccentric Du coupled with the spatial rings of these human profounders. His gains today could be said to be rather abundant. Yang Yi looked through the spatial rings of those human profounders he'd just killed first, and he was instantly infuriated when he saw the content of their spatial rings. It turned out there were over 10,000 energy stones for high-grade talismans and hundreds of mid-grade talismans in their spatial rings. So, the compensation they provided earlier was really like tossing coins to a beggar. Moreover, they weren't even willing to do that. Luckily, I didn't lend a hand to those idiots. Otherwise, I would be the true idiot. Yang Yi shook his head, and then his gaze descended onto the spatial rings from eccentric Du and the siblings from the Mo clan. Yang Yi was instantly delighted when his spiritual energy entered the rings belonging to the siblings from the Mo clan because there were an entire 30,000+ energy stones within them. Moreover, there were even 12 top-grade energy stones. Besides that, there was a high-grade Earth rank technique as well, the Heavenly Demon Dance. Even though the Heavenly Demon Dance was useless to him, but he could sell it away. A high-grade Earth rank technique could absolutely be sold for an astronomical price. Besides this technique, there were a few low-grade Earth rank techniques. However, Yang Yi wasn't interested in these techniques because he was only interested in sword techniques. After he put those 2 spatial rings away, Yang Yi gazed at Eccentric Du's spatial ring. When he just activated the spatial ring, a strand of pink powder had suddenly surged out from the spatial ring and instantly entered his body. This sudden and unexpected event caused the expressions of both Yang Yi and Xianxia to change. Right when Yang Yi's expression had changed, his body suddenly felt as if it was on fire, and then a hot feeling started to arise in him. This was especially so for his lower abdomen. It felt as if it was on the verge of bursting into flames. This sort of feeling was familiar to him. The Grand Myriad Mountains, Xianxia. When he thought up to here, Yang Yi's expression changed once more while he cursed himself for being careless. After that, he hurriedly circulated the profound energy within his body as he intended to utilize the golden profound energy. However, right at this moment, the remaining golden profound energy within his normal dantian had been suddenly absorbed into the tiny vortex. Yang Yi was stunned. What's the tiny vortex doing? Yang Yi was slightly anxious when he sensed that his body was growing hotter and hotter, and he hurriedly withdrew a few energy stones and started absorbing the energy within them. Yang Yi was delighted when the energy stones were converted into profound energy. However, right before a smile could cover his entire face, that bit of profound energy had been taken away by the tiny vortex again. Motherfucker! Yang Yi couldn't help but curse when he witnessed this scene. However, he just cursed when the tiny vortex suddenly started to circulate swiftly before a strand of terrifying suction force suddenly surged from it, causing Yang Yi's internal organs to be instantly twisted. The sudden attack from the tiny vortex caused Yang Yi to be caught off guard, and he let out a shrill cry. However, this wasn't the end because the clothes on his body had actually started to burn. Fortunately, his physical body was strong, so ordinary flames were utterly unable to harm him. Xianxia's beautiful brows knit together when she witnessed this scene. She was naturally aware of what poison Yang Yi was suffering from. But based on Yang Yi's appearance, he didn't seem like he was merely poisoned. The tiny vortex seemed to intend to teach Yang Yi a lesson, so it stopped after it launched that first attack and didn't continue. However, Yang Yi's golden profound energy had been completely sucked away, and not a single trace was left for him. Yang Yi's eyes gradually turned red while his consciousness started to slowly become blurred. It was like he'd become a wild beast. Suddenly, Yang Yi turned to gaze at Xianxia, and a glow of burning desire arose in his eyes. Xianxia's brows knit together even more tightly when she saw Yang Yi like that, and she instinctively tightened her grip on her saber's handles. Leave! Yang Yi howled at her in a hoarse voice, and then he suddenly slapped the ground with his palms and relied on the counterforce to flash towards the side. At this moment, Yang Yi's consciousness hadn't blurred completely, and he knew that he would be unable to restrain his desire if he stayed here any longer. Moreover, he was very clearly aware that he would definitely die if he made a move against Xianxia. Because there wasn't even a trace of profound energy within his body right now, and coupled with the state he was in, how could he possibly be a match for Xianxia who'd comprehended 7th level saber intent? So, he hadn't hesitated to tell her to leave and seized the moment when he hadn't lost consciousness to swiftly leave her side. Xianxia was stunned when she heard him, and his figure had vanished from her field of vision when she recovered from her shock. Xianxia stared blankly for a while at the direction Yang Yi had vanished towards, and then she sighed lightly and flashed off in pursuit of him. Ancient Domain City. A woman in a green dress stood proudly outside the city. She glanced at the grand city before she shook her head and said, "This is Ancient Domain City? So there's nothing great about it. It's even smaller than my home." A profounder that was about to enter the city had heard her, and he instantly stopped and said, "Smaller than your home? What high-sounding sentiments. It's your first time here, right? Since you're so beautiful, I'll give you a warning. Keep a lower profile here because Ancient Domain City is filled with the best geniuses from the various territories. Don't offend someone you can't afford to offend. Otherwise, you'll die before you even realize it. The woman in a green dress turned to gaze at the young man, and then she said, I need to ask you about someone. Do you know about a person called Xianxia? Xianxia. The young man frowned and said, Why are you looking for him? Even though he's quite arrogant, his strength is extremely formidable. After all, he was able to. A strand of green light flashed, and then a blood hole had instantly appeared in this young man's chest. You really talk too much. The woman in a green dress shook her head, and then she waved her right hand. In an instant, an enormous green energy sword instantly appeared beneath her feet, and then her fingers moved slightly before the green energy sword instantly shot into the sky. In less than a breath of time, she vanished from Ancient Domain City. As soon as the woman vanished, a white-haired old man had suddenly appeared where she stood just now. He glanced at the young man who had died with everlasting regret before a wisp of a solemn expression flashed in the old man's eyes. He said, Peak 7th level sword intent, controlling the sword with the heart wind intent. As expected of the most monstrous genius of the Mo clan. Alas, the hidden dragon rankings is going to be interesting. After an unknown period of time, Xianxia felt that his head was extremely heavy, and it felt like his head was filled with lead. After another period of time, Xianxia shook his head with all his strength, and then he opened his eyes slowly. The scene before his eyes was completely pitch-black darkness. There wasn't even a trace of light here, and the surroundings were deathly silent. Xianxia frowned. He tried to circulate the profound energy in his body, but he noticed that his body was completely empty and devoid of even a trace of profound energy. Xianxia laid on the spot and remained silent for a while as he tried hard to recall what had happened before he lost consciousness. After a long time, Xianxia finally recalled what had happened. Who exactly saved me? Xianxia muttered in his heart, and then he shouted loudly, Miss Xiao, is it you? The surroundings were still deathly silent and without any sound at all. After pondering deeply for a moment, Xianxia stood up. However, he just stood up when he felt a weak feeling from his legs, and then he fell right back to the ground. Right when he was about to hit the ground, a wave of refreshing fragrance assaulted his nose before a pair of hands had held his waist. Bang! A light bang resounded as a strand of light from a fire appeared within Xianxia's field of vision, and then the light gradually spread to the point he was able to see where he was. At this moment he was in a cave, and it was Xianxia who was supporting him up. Xianxia withdrew her hands after she helped Xianxia up, and then she moved her gaze away and fell silent once more. You were the one who saved me? Xianxia was the first to break the silence. Xianxia didn't answer him, and it caused Xianxia to be in a slightly embarrassing position. How did you save me? I remember that I seem to have been inflicted with. Xianxia's face suddenly turned red, and then she glared at Xianxia and said, You saved me once, so I've saved you once as well. We don't owe each other anything. Don't ask about anything else. I'll kill you if you ask about it again. Xianxia was at a loss for what to say. What exactly happened to you just now? Xianxia changed the topic. Xianxia didn't want to stay on the topic of how she saved him as well. In any case, it wasn't important because he was still alive in the end. So, Xianxia immediately pondered deeply and said, I'm facing some issues, and I might not be able to head to the Nether God's tomb for now. Even though he still could battle even without profound energy, he couldn't be careless at all in the ancient battlefield, because there were too many experts here, and the slightest bit of carelessness could cost him his life. Xianxia said in a low voice, It's fine. The Nether God's tomb only opens on the 15th day of the 7th month at sunset. There are still 5 days until then. When she spoke up to hear, Xianxia glanced at Xianxia, and then her gaze paused on him for a moment before she said, What exactly happened to you? Why don't you have any profound energy in your body? Xianxia spoke with an astounded expression. How did you know about that? Xianxia instantly revealed a slightly embarrassed expression. Suddenly, a strand of cold light flashed. Bang! A light bang resounded as a bottomless mark of a saber, had appeared on the rock wall at the side. Xianxia moved her eyes away and said in a cold voice, "Don't ask about it." The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched. "This woman. Even though your physical body is strong, your strength has been greatly reduced without any profound energy. It would be fine if you encounter ordinary profounders, but it's very likely that you'll lose your life if you encounter those top-rate geniuses," said Xianxia in a flat voice. Yang Yi nodded and said, "I'm naturally aware of that, and that's why I'm unable to head to the Nether God's tomb for now. I have to solve this problem I'm facing first. You can leave if you have other things to attend to." Xianxia glanced at Yang Yi, and then she waved her hand. A few dozed green balls of light appeared in front of Yang Yi, and then she said, "Absorb these souls. They are beneficial to the improvement of your soul and sword intent." "They are beneficial to sword intent?" Yang Yi spoke with astonishment. "You're saying that these souls can improve my sword intent?" "They can strengthen it," Xianxia said in a low voice. "There's a certain level of a link between the strength of your sword intent and the strength of your soul. The stronger the soul is, the more condensed your sword intent would be. Moreover, the stronger your soul is, the stronger your spiritual energy would be, and the strength of your spiritual energy influences your proficiency in controlling your sword intent. You've seen me control my saber intent, right?" Yang Yi nodded, and he was unable to maintain calm when he recalled how she controlled her saber intent that day, because he finally found a way to strengthen his sword intent. "Absorb them," said Xianxia. Yang Yi nodded, and then he stopped hesitating and swallowed them. In an instant, the green balls of light instantly entered his body, and then an indescribable feeling swept through his entire body. After a short while, Yang Yi gazed at her and said, "I need more." The corners of Xianxia's eyes twitched slightly, and then she said flatly, "I have none left." Yang Yi was stunned when he heard this, and then he smiled with embarrassment. He finally understood why those human profounders and youth from the devil race would be fighting for these souls. It turned out that they were treasures. Even though he was unable to utilize his sword intent right now, his intuition told him that his sword intent had strengthened a little. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't possess even a trace of profound energy right now, then he really wanted to go around plundering. Yang Yi couldn't help but frown when he thought about the state his body was in, because the tiny vortex seemed to be acting slightly unusually. Could it be that there's something wrong with the tiny vortex? Or perhaps it needs a huge amount of profound energy like it had in the past. When she saw Yang Yi in deep thought with a frown on his face, Xianxia's eyes drooped. She hesitated for a moment before she walked out of the cave. She stopped momentarily right before she left the cave and said, "You have to be careful of those fellows from the Nether territory. Their ability is much more mysterious than you've imagined. Don't be careless. Besides that, if you encounter an expert sent by the Mo clan, then it's best that you don't fight that person for now. If it's her, then her instant death is absolutely not a technique that you can evade and resist." As soon as she finished speaking, she didn't stay here any longer and vanished from the cave. Yang Yi was stunned for a short while before he shook his head because he didn't have the time to think about all of that. The important matter at hand was to make the tiny vortex go back to normal, otherwise, he wouldn't be able to do anything in the ancient battlefield. With a flip of his palm, a few hundred energy stones appeared in Yang Ye's hand, and then he started madly absorbing them. Just as he'd expected, as soon as the energy stones were converted into profound energy, they were instantly absorbed by the tiny vortex. Yang Yi frowned when he witnessed this scene, and then he stopped hesitating and started absorbing the energy stones like a madman. In less than 2 hours, a few thousand energy stones had transformed into ashes. However, the tiny vortex was like a bottomless hole that couldn't be filled no matter how much profound energy he provided it. After 4 hours passed, over 10,000 energy stones had vanished, but the tiny vortex was still absorbing crazily. Yang Yi was still absorbing the energy stones. If someone were to find out that Yang Yi was squandering energy stones like this, then they would probably be angered to the point of killing him, because this was truly too much of a waste. Even the disciples of the large sects were unable to spend energy stones in such a lavish manner. Time gradually passed by. Yang Yi absorbed from morning until night and then continued from the night until the day. Just like that, 3 days had passed. On the 4th day, a group of profounders from the Devil Territory and Nether Territory had arrived at the cave which Yang Yi resided in, and then leaders of these groups were Moku and Han Yu. After Yang Yi had let that group of youths from the Devil Territory go the other day, they naturally didn't let the matter rest. After all, they'd given Yang Yi everything they'd worked hard to obtain. So, they immediately looked for Moku, and Moku was instantly infuriated when he heard that his fellow members of the devil race had been robbed by Yang Yi. So, he immediately gathered all the members of the devil race in the 9th hell to search for Yang Yi. Moku knew that Yang Yi had a flying dark beast and the spatial mink. So he went looking for Han Yu and Ing Long because he wanted them to keep the spatial mink and flying dark beast busy. In this way, if Yang Yi didn't have the assistance of the spatial mink and the flying dark beast, then killing Yang Yi would be as easy as flipping his palm. I smell his aura. Han Yu gazed at the cave which Yang Yi resided in and said in a gloomy voice, "He should be inside. Haha. Aren't the 3 of us thinking too highly of him by joining forces to kill him?" Moku shook his head and said, "Any one of us has the ability to kill him. However, don't forget that he has a flying dark beast and that mysterious spatial mink by his side. It won't be easy for us to kill him while he has them by his side." Han Yu laughed gloomily but didn't refute this. Moku raised his head to gaze at the green dragons that were circling in the sky above. After that, he nodded, and then he gazed towards the cave that Yang Yi resided in while a wisp of a ruthless expression flashed in his eyes. He took a step forward before he pushed his right palm forward, and then he pulled his palm back. In the next moment, he suddenly blasted his fist forward again. In an instant, a terrifying gale surged from his palm. Bang! In an instant, the mountain which that cave resided in had been instantly obliterated. Han Yu's eyes narrowed when he witnessed this scene. Obviously, Moku's strength had slightly exceeded his expectations. After all, even though the mountain was small, it was almost 300 m tall. Even a spirit realm expert might not be able to shake such a mountain. But Moku had obliterated it with a simple punch, as expected of the most monstrous genius in the devil race for the last 1,000 years. Big Brother is awesome. After a moment of silence, the youths from the devil race behind Moku had let out a wave of deafening cheers, and their cheers shot into the sky and shook the 9 heavens. Moku glanced at Yang Yi, who was in the ruins of the mountain, and then his figure flashed and instantly arrived in front of Yang Yi. After that, he clenched his right hand into a fist before he smashed it forcefully towards Yang Ye's head. A wisp of a vicious expression flashed in Yang Ye's eyes when he saw Moku's fist assault him. These fellows from the devil race and nether race are really like ghosts that just refuse to go away. Yang Yi didn't have the time to think too much about it. He shouted loudly as he blasted a punch towards Moku's fist. If he could, he would naturally prefer to use his sword. After all, Moku's strength was extremely formidable. However, it couldn't be helped. There wasn't even a trace of profound energy within his entire body. So, he could only use his physical strength to go head-on against Moku's attack. Fortunately, his physical strength was extremely formidable as well. Moku grunted coldly when he noticed Yang Yi using his fists instead of his sword, and then Moku said, "You're courting death." As soon as he finished speaking, his fist suddenly spun, causing the space around it to tremble. Under the gazes of everyone in the surroundings, their fists collided head-on. Bang! Yang Yi was directly blasted, flying 300 m away before he smashed to the ground, and he smashed open a huge and deep hole where he landed. On the other hand, Moku remained motionless on the spot like a mountain, to the shock of everyone. Yang Yi, who'd crashed to the ground and leaped up from the deep hole. The expressions of the youths from the devil race changed when they witnessed this scene. They were clearly aware of how shocking their big brother's strength was. Because not to mention a king realm expert, even ordinary spirit realm experts wouldn't dare to go head-on against Moku's physical strength. However, Yang Yi had done so, and he seemed to be completely fine. Moku's expression changed slightly as well. He knew Yang Ye's physical body wasn't bad. but he didn't know that it was formidable to such an extent. After all, even though he'd merely utilized less than 40% of his strength just now, it wasn't something that a 5th-rank King Realm Profounder could withstand. Obviously, he'd underestimated this sword cultivator called Xianxia since the very beginning. But so what if I've underestimated him? No matter how strong an ant is, can it triumph over an elephant? At this moment, Xianxia had a solemn expression on his face because he noticed that Emoku was far stronger than he'd imagined. Even though he seemed to be completely fine, his entire body was extremely sore right now, and he couldn't feel his right hand. Moreover, the energy within his body was roiling. If he hadn't suppressed it by force, then he would have probably been unable to stand up by now. If it was merely based on physical strength alone, then he was inferior to Emoku. Of course, if he utilized his golden profound energy, then the boost it provided might allow his physical strength to be capable of rivaling Emoku. But unfortunately, he didn't have a trace of profound energy within his body now. Emoku gazed at Xianxia as he stated indifferently, "Use your sword. Otherwise, you're going to die." Xianxia laughed bitterly in his head. Would he refrain from using it if he could use it? I really don't know what's wrong with the tiny vortex. It's actually acting so unusually. It has absorbed that much profound energy, yet it's still not enough. What exactly is it trying to do? Xianxia raised his head to gaze at the colossi that were circling in the air, and the bitterness on the corners of his mouth grew denser. Looks like these fellows from the devil race, nether race, and demon race really intend to kill me. Since you refuse to draw your sword, then go to hell. Emoku spoke coldly before his figure shot explosively towards Xianxia. When he was only around 30 m away from Xianxia, Emoku had suddenly blasted his right fist forward. In an instant, an energy fist shot out violently from his fist. Everywhere it passed, the air was completely crushed into powder while numerous white spikes of air appeared around it. Xianxia's expression changed when he witnessed this scene. If he had profound energy within his body, then he could naturally utilize his sword to deal with this terrifying attack. However, he could only go head-on against it with his physical body. But could his physical body endure it right now? Xianxia took a deep breath. Right when he was about to fight desperately, a strand of cold light had suddenly flashed here, and it instantly blasted against that energy fist. Bang! The energy fist and cold light exploded apart, and they transformed into a wave of air that swept towards the surroundings. The wave of air dispersed, and Xianxia was suddenly standing in front of Xianxia, while she held that curved saber of hers in her left hand. Obviously, it was she who'd launched that attack earlier. Emoku, Hanyu, and the others' expressions changed when they saw Xianxia who'd suddenly appeared here. Emoku took a step forward and spoke in a low voice. 7th level saber intent. I never expected that someone amongst the human profounders was actually able to attain the 7th level of an intent. Xianxia glanced indifferently at Emoku, and then she turned to glance at Xianxia and said, "Leave, I'll stop them." As soon as she finished speaking, Xianxia turned around to gaze at Emoku and the others. After that, a strand of invisible and terrifying saber intent surged out explosively. Under the pressure exuded by her saber intent, all the others besides Emoku and Hanyu couldn't help but take over 10 steps back. A wisp of unusual emotion flashed in his heart as he gazed at Xianxia. Xianxia wasn't stupid, so he knew that it was absolutely not a coincidence that she'd appeared here. She probably hadn't left at all during the last few days. Why didn't she leave? Was she protecting me? Emoku's face sank when he sensed the boundless and terrifying saber intent that Xianxia emanated. Right when he was about to attack, the glow of a sword flashed through the air before a woman who wore a green dress descended from the sky. The woman in a green dress frowned when she noticed the saber intent that was raging through here, and then a strand of terrifying sword intent surged out from within her. 7th level sword intent. Everyone here was stunned when they witnessed this scene. When had so many extraordinary geniuses appeared amongst the humans? Emoku and Hanyu's faces fell. 2 extraordinary geniuses who'd comprehended 7th level intents were a threat even to them. Fortunately, it seemed like there was enmity between the woman in a green dress and the white-haired woman. Because the woman in a green dress was looking at the white-haired woman with a hostile gaze. Xianxia frowned when she saw this woman. She tightened her grip on the saber in her hand before she said, "Mo Qingyu, I didn't think that the Mo clan would really dispatch you." "I wasn't dispatched in the beginning." Mo Qingyu glanced at Yang Yi and said, "I merely heard that a quasi-sword emperor appeared in ancient domain city, and that's why I came." "A quasi-sword emperor? Haha. I'm really curious who has the qualifications to be worthy of this title in the entire Profounder continent. Now that I've seen him, the 5th level of the King Realm and 6th level of Sword Intent is truly disappointing." Yang Yi was shocked in his heart when he heard this because she was actually able to see through his Cultivation realm and level of Sword Intent with a single glance. No wonder even Xianxia, who possesses 7th level Saber Intent, is extremely fearful of her. Meanwhile, Mo Qingyu said, "Xianxia, I didn't come here for you today. Move aside and make him withstand 3 strikes of my sword. I'll spare his life if he can accomplish that." "It was I who killed that pair of siblings from the Mo clan," said Xianxia. "That isn't important," Mo Qingyu said indifferently. "I merely came here to kill this fellow who's called the Quasi-Sword Emperor. After all, this title is the highest honor amongst us sword cultivators. And not just anyone is worthy of it. Even if it's merely the title of Quasi-Sword Emperor." Xianxia was looking down. Suddenly, she turned to gaze at Yang Yi, and she had a slightly displeased expression as she said, "Why haven't you left?" Yang Yi smiled bitterly when he heard this. "How could I possibly leave right now? Moreover, there are enemies everywhere, so it's impossible to leave even if I wanted to." "You should leave," Yang Yi said in a light voice. "With your strength, they will absolutely not stop you, nor can they stop you if you intend to leave." "I refuse." Xianxia glanced at him and spoke in a low voice. "Why?" Yang Yi was puzzled. "I don't know." Xianxia turned to gaze at Mo Qingyu, and then she slowly drew her curved blade before she accumulated strength to attack. Yang Yi was speechless. Mo Qingyu glanced at Yang Yi, and then she glanced at Xianxia and said, "Haha, the rumors said that your father wanted you to marry the future Sword Emperor of the continent. Looks like it wasn't a rumor. But Xianxia, are you that sure that he's the future Sword Emperor? If he isn't, then wouldn't you have paid a huge price for nothing? If you want to fight, then let's fight. Why waste your breath on so much nonsense?" said Xianxia in a cold voice. Mo Qingyu said, "Xianxia, look, I'm not the only one here who wants to kill him. If you were to fight me, then who would protect your lover?" Xianxia frowned, and then she said after a short while, "I'll do my best." Mo Qingyu nodded and said, "Since it's like that, then both of you can die together." As she spoke, she intended to attack. However, right at this moment, "Wait!" Yang Yi, who'd been silent until now, had suddenly stepped forward. "What?" Mo Qingyu glanced indifferently at Yang Yi. Yang Yi grinned, and then he said, "Let us leave safely if I'm able to resist 3 strikes of your sword without utilizing profound energy. What do you think?" "Without using profound energy?" Mo Qingyu ridiculed and said, "What high-sounding sentiments, but we'll do it as you wish. Let me see exactly what ability you, the one who's called the Quasi-Sword Emperor, possesses. Besides that, what if you're unable to withstand it?" Yang Yi smiled. "Then I'll die." "You're pretty optimistic." Mo Qingyu spoke indifferently. Yang Yi was just about to speak when Xianxia suddenly moved over to stand in front of him, and then she said in a low voice, "She's very strong." "I know," said Yang Yi while he smiled at her. "You'll die in your current condition." "I know." "Then why do you still intend to do it?" Yang Yi smiled and said, "If I don't, then it wouldn't be 1 person but 2 who would die today. The members of the Devil Race, Nether Race, and Demon Race were only targeting him and not Xianxia. However, if he didn't make a bet with the woman in a green dress, then the outcome would be that all of them would join forces to jointly attack him and Xianxia. With the condition he was currently in, he didn't have the slightest chance of surviving. So he could only make this bet with Mo Qingyu. If he died, then Mo Ku and the others would definitely leave, so even if Xianxia couldn't defeat Mo Qingyu in battle, she would still be able to survive. On the other hand, it couldn't be any better if he could withstand her attacks because then he would have Mo Qingyu's help as well. At that time, it would be even easier for him to leave this place. As for whether Mo Qingyu would go back on her word, Yang Yi believed that she wouldn't. After all, sword cultivators were extremely proud, not to mention that she was one who had comprehended 7th-level sword intent. Mo Qingyu glanced at Mo Ku and Han Yu before she said, "Both of you don't object, right? If you do, then I can only help you leave first." Mo Ku glanced at Yang Yi and said, "Please go ahead." He was naturally not afraid of Mo Qingyu. However, if Mo Qingyu were to join forces with Xiao Yushi, then numerous disciples of the devil race would probably die. That was something he was unwilling to see. Mo Qingyu glanced at Han Yu, and the latter chuckled and said, "It's my favorite to watch humans kill each other. So, please go ahead." Mo Qingyu took a deep glance at Han Yu, and then she turned around to gaze at Yang Yi before she said, "Are you prepared?" "Bring it on," said Yang Yi. Mo Qingyu nodded. She didn't seem to have made any movement at all, but 100 green energy swords had suddenly floated in front of her. Xiao Yushi's expression changed when she witnessed this scene. 100 swords rose with a single command.